Okay, tool 5. We're more than half of the way there. Another tool you need to understand how the brain works is that the brain is both plastic and static. Here's what this means. If you remember one thing I teach you today, I've changed the way your brain is wired. Brain changes are what learning is. So that's a plastic organ. In other words, it changes. But the brain is also static. That means there are parts of it that don't change. And if I try to teach you not to breathe, and I threaten you not to breathe, and I shoot you if you do breathe, you're going to breathe because that's like a system that you can't stop, right? Thank goodness or we'd screw it up. So in some ways, the brain is like a muscle. You've heard that by people selling software to exercise your brain. But in some processes, it's like a scar. Sometimes I think of addiction like a scar. That gets to the model of chronic progressive disorder. I'm pretty sure that if someone has gone through the cycle of heroin addiction and withdrawal 500 times, that their brain is not going to forget parts of that for their whole life. I'm pretty sure of that, as much as I can. Now, do I have the clear science to back that up? So the idea of curing that biology, I don't know. Can I build a life so that biology doesn't drive the thing? Sure. But do I fix it? I don't think so. I think there may be a scar. So some of the cure mentality, which is very hopeful. So speaking of scars, tattoos are scars, right? I did a little internet search to find tattoos that you wish you didn't get. But tattoos always remind me, my kids aren't going to get tattoos until they either pay their own way or are 25, because these are scars you can't erase. This is why we shouldn't expose kids to addictive drugs, because they can scar the brain. They create scars. So I can put an electrode in this fellow's head and tweak a part of his brain, and he can remember stuff from high school. This proves the point that memories are located in brain cells. This is a study I did with 20,000 people's reports of their childhood, merely to make the point. So very quickly, people in the blue are patients in treatment for mental health problems. People in red are not. And going down the line are how much childhood trauma have you had? You'll notice that when you get no childhood trauma, more people in the community had no childhood trauma than people who were in treatment for brain-based disorders. But then when you get to moderate and severe amounts of childhood trauma, suddenly the vast majority are in treatment for a brain-based disorder. So one of the reasons that you want to understand that the brain is not completely plastic is if I see you and you tell me you had a very rough childhood, what I think in my mind is those experiences created a little scar in your brain. That doesn't mean you can't have a life and be happy and yada, yada, yada. But that created a little scar in your brain. We know that. We call them limbic scars. So suddenly we have an organ that responds to experiences by making memories. And we know that one of the places that these memories may get made is in the amygdala. That's the stress center of your brain. And this is a study using the childhood trauma scale. And what they did was they put people in the scanner and they showed them scary and mad faces. And people who had more childhood trauma, their brains were more active when they saw scary or mad faces than people who had less trauma. So people's brains change based on their experiences. That's the plastic part. Giving patients morphine for a month changes their brain. We all know this after 10 years in the field. So exposure to opiates changes your brain. And I'm actually just conscious of our time. I'm going to skip this experiment, but tell me to talk about it later. But I'm not just talking about giving you medicine, because if Jeff teaches you meditation, that changes your brain. This is a study on changes in brain circuits by people who practice meditation. You don't get it after one trial, but if you practice for 30 days, your brain's different. Let's go to rule number 6. So when you're thinking about the brain, we're almost home. When you're thinking about the brain, I want you to think about dogs. Here's 2 ways that dogs can teach you about the brain. A, dogs are very social mammals, and so are humans. So when someone's talking about doing recovery solamente, it probably won't work, not because 12 Steps says it, but because humans are social creatures. The second reason I think about dogs, this is going to scare everybody. So let me show you some pictures of dogs. These are African wild dogs. Notice that they're together at the trough. Some of the brain biology of sociality is caused by oxytocin. If you want me to talk for an hour on that, I could, but we didn't know this 10 years ago. Now we do. And interestingly, oxytocin is part of what makes dogs bond with us. But let me just go on to the following picture. I'm sorry, this picture. So when I talk to you and you're in my recovery program, I'm thinking of you like a dog in this way. All of these dogs are cousins, right? The species name is what? Anybody dog? Canis what? Familiaris. Right? Canis familiaris. They're all cousins. Now, do they look pretty different? Do they act pretty different? These guys are cousins. Check that out. How is that possible? So just like dogs differ in body size, they differ in behavior. And are there different kinds of people in the world? And what do we call the kind of dog you are? We call that your personality, right? Or your temperament. Or I call it the way you're wired. Some people are outgoing, some people are shy, some people are this, some people are that. But we're all cousins if, Homo habilis or Homo whatever you call you, but we're all the same species. And part of those differences are driven by differences in brain biology. So dogs can teach us something about the brain. And this is a big study over the whole world that talked about the fact that all over the world, humans have certain ways they're wired. Jeff, you do personality testing in the program, right? The reason I'm interested in your personality is because that may help me direct you in some different ways and help you understand how you roll through the world and how that may help your recovery. And it's, again, driven by brain biology. You'll notice, bring back Sisyphus, he's pushing the rock alone. That's probably not the best way to push the rock. It's just less likely to be helpful because of brain biology and because we're a very social and evolved species. This little guy doesn't survive very long if he doesn't hang on. It's just wired into his brain. When he falls, he loves his mom, his dopamine system goes. If he falls off, his stress system's going, and he's going to hang on to his mom and all the big people his whole life. This is why Buddha's wrong. I'm poking on Buddha today. He wouldn't mind. He's a chill guy. He says the root of suffering is attachment. And I know he's not talking about like attachment theory and love and all that stuff, but I am. Because one of the roots of suffering as a human mammal is not attachment, but is isolation. When you isolate monkeys, keep them away from their moms and they can't have normal social interaction, just think about this for a minute. They can't mate, they're vicious, they fight to the death, dismembering opponents. It sounds like that one kind of fighting that, They self-mutilate and they can't mate. So human mammals, we're primates, human mammals don't do well in isolation. So when Jeff's talking about the reason meetings are important, you can go, but I don't need to go supernatural. I can say we're a social species. We just don't do well alone. We don't bear pain well alone. And this is from Kurt Vonnegut's son, who has apparently suffered with a mental illness and became a pediatrician. We're here to get each other through this thing, whatever it is. It's a nice way to think about what our job is on this little rock.